Hello and welcome to Search Laboratory's online workshop. So today we're going to talk about kickstarting your marketing in a post-pandemic world. It should last around 30 minutes and there should be some time penciled in for questions. So just enter them in the chat box and I'll answer them at the end. Okay, so a little bit about Search Laboratory. Search Laboratory, we're a global integrated digital marketing agency. We have offices in both Leeds in the UK and in New York in America. We undertake all of the services there on your screen, and we can do that in multiple languages and all tailored towards that main top level of integrated objective. I'm Jimmy. I'm the head of digital strategy at Search Laboratory. I head up a team of digital strategists, and our aim really is to make sure that we're taking that top level business goal or collective objective, and we're building the right strategy online to meet those objectives, to spend the money in the most efficient manner. Okay, so the agenda for today. We're going to run through when's the right time to start ramping up your digital marketing activity again, if such is the case, you've pulled back in the certain circumstances. We're going to then look at how specifically you can what tactics you can employ on those digital tactics upon ramp up. And also a little bit about how you can be productive in the current environment with activity that you might be doing on a residual basis. So when should you get started with ramping up? Just to some of the implications of not timing it right is, the competition could get a start on you. You could miss out on some opportunity to really hit the ground running once demand starts to come back and increase. Alternatively, if you started too early, then you could risk spending a lot of budget when the demand's not there. So reduced conversion rates mean that your cost per acquisition or your return on ad spend might be considerably lower than it would be in normal circumstances. And another thing to consider is this is not a one size fits all, as we know with the easing of various restrictions in different countries and across different markets. There's differences per vertical in terms of when things are getting back up to speed or up to some sense of normality. So I'm going to start with just showing you a dashboard that is available. You can download this template and connect your own data to it to understand when demand starts returning. We feel that the best measure of this on a daily or weekly basis is to really understand what's happening in terms of search and in terms of search impressions. So I'm just going to jump out and into a Data Studio dashboard. So what this is showing us here, if I start on the left-hand side panel underneath the 2020 section. So the number to the right-hand side, we have a 3-day average daily average impressions. So this is taking an average of the last 3 days and getting the daily average of those 3 days, and we can see that number there. What this is then doing is comparing to the previous 10 days daily average, which is actually in the middle metric of those top numbers. So you can see that we're actually almost 6% down based on the last 10 days over the last 3 days, if that makes sense. And that might be due to bank holidays in the UK and US, for example. In terms of the next number, so the 10-day average number of impressions is being compared to the previous 21 days. So you can see there that there's a bit of a plateau there still. You know, it's not changed all that much. It's down very slightly. And then we have finally on the left-hand side, the number is the 21-day daily average, and that is compared to the previous 21 days. So you can see that it's actually it's gone up. So the last 3 weeks have been considered, you know, 10% better or 9% better, sorry, than the prior 3 weeks to that. The reason why we're using a daily average number of impressions is to smooth out any fluctuations you might see day to day or weekend or throughout the week, to truly understand. And the thing that we're looking for is for, you know, these to all start you know, showing an upturn in fortunes and going green. You can actually dig a little bit deeper in terms of looking at how that looks per device. So this is based off this date range in terms of these tables here. So we're looking at the last 30 days versus the prior 30 days. So you can actually see that in this given example, there's some signs of recovery based on what would be the first you know, the month of April, which was very much in the UK at least, it was the height of lockdown. And then you can see a breakdown per country. These are all interactive, by the way, so you can you know, you can click on these and it will filter everything within the dashboard based on either device or country. On the right hand side, you can this is just a comparison chart based on what happened last year. So you can get an understanding of you know, did impressions daily average change at a similar time last year, so to then compare and contrast with what's happening this year. So that's, you're able to see what is happening on that front. It's really easy to connect, so you would just copy, you would get a template and then just connect your own. You would need access to your own Search Console data in Google Search Console, and then connect that in as a data source in Data Studio, and it all should start working for you. So how to get your digital channels back up to speed. So we're going to start with key audiences, and then talk a little bit about being flexible and agile to the information that is coming back. Tracking is critical in this period, and getting the measures right, making sure you're tracking the right thing. And also, let's not forget messaging, and we'll talk about that in a little bit more detail. So as far as key audiences go, you know, when we start to ramp up again, it's critical that you're not wasting any spend. So try to define and target your audiences as tightly as possible. So that might mean in avoiding ambiguous search terms. So so these might be you know, broader generic terms that don't necessarily encapsulate your audience in its entirety. So an example of this might be if, you know, we have a home office or an office retailer who might sell office chairs or office desks. The intent behind the user who's typing that into Google isn't defined. If they're either a business to business consumer or you know, a domestic consumer. If you're targeting the business to business, then those broader terms might capture an awful lot of you know, irrelevant, I suppose, or lower value purchasers that may be domestic users. So I either, you know, avoid those particular type of terms, or narrow them down, narrow the targeting down using you know, layers of audience. So that might mean targeting certain demographic, or even utilizing you know, that Google's audience features, such as similar audience, and you know, it based on you know, previous purchases that would then exclude an awful lot of the search market around those more ambiguous terms, and lead to a much more focused you know, spend on as far as trying to capture the customers that you really need. It's also good to test the water, so we can use this exact niche targeting method to understand how users are behaving. You know, is their intent back? Is the demand? Is their intent to purchase based on a conversion rate? Is that a similar level as it was before? It might even be higher if things are let go, and there's been an awful lot of research during this phase, and then people are ready to buy. So it'd be good to, it's a good learning tool. So as far as flexibility is concerned, as I said, you know, we need to learn quickly and be agile. You know, we know that we mentioned before that, you know, the lockdown is being relaxed or relented in different ways in different countries, and even within different locales within different countries. So make sure that you're on top of the data and learning, and potentially geo-targeting or defining certain audiences where things are performing better and worse, and directing spend there. Making sure that bid strategies are adjusted for new behaviors. You know, the intent to do the end action, i.e. purchase something, might have lessened somewhat. However, you still might want to acquire a customer using a softer conversion. So maybe adjust a bid strategy from a ROAS to a CPA or something like that. As far as auto bidding is concerned as well, you know, the behaviors are different. The information coming back is going to be different. So do take into account learning phases that technologies like SA360 or DV360 might use in as far as auto bidding. And this all helps us be a little bit more flexible and efficient with our marketing budgets, which are, you know, going to be very strict and tight, I suppose, when everything comes back. As far as tracking goes, keep track of all your digital buys. You know, the guys in our teams have fed back an awful lot about you know, there's certain CPMs or CPCs which might be a little bit cheaper than they used to be due to less competition. So make sure that you're you know, taking those opportunities on board and spending money in the right areas on that front. Tracking alternative measures of success. I mentioned this in the previous one on flexibility, but as I said, the intent to do the end thing that you want somebody to do, that either a purchase or a lead conversion, might not be quite there. So do track your relevant acquisition of relevant customers in different ways. So that might be via an engaged visit, defined. We'll look at this shortly, but you know, defined it however you would see that based on prior behaviors, and as I said, analyze those pre-pandemic behaviors to try and understand what people did that correlates with high intent and a relevant user, and measure that. The reason why we do this is that, you know, we can get we can optimize to a more abundant goal if people are less inclined to perform that end conversion. So we can optimize more to engagements, for example, and we're getting relevant audience to our sites. Messaging is also a critical thing to consider more than ever, I suppose. People have been through an awful lot. It's very close to home in a lot of cases. So be empathetic to your customer base. Think about what they're feeling and the things they're experiencing right now, and reflect that in any messaging. Do communicate what your company is doing about the measures that might be in place when everything's coming back. You know, what are you open for business? Are your hours different? What measures will people have to adhere to if they're coming to a physical place? Or on what you're doing about keeping your employees safe. So do that using social and email to make sure that you're clearly communicating all of that. Moving on. So so in terms of what you should and you can be doing now to be productive. So here's a few things that you could be doing now. So again, with lower intent to convert, that it's critical to measure and pay attention to users' behaviors. Define even value and measure the engagements, and potentially create the goal conversion for that as well. Create soft conversions, and potentially during this time, if there's a lower intent, we can still reach a relevant audience and build that awareness for when demand does return. So users' behavior, that an intent to purchase might be much less, but there's still very relevant people coming to your websites. So it's really important to potentially use this time to undertake research and try to understand whether these users that you're currently bringing to your site are relevant and potentially likely to convert at a later point. So we would definitely recommend analysing what happened previously and understanding how you could define an engaged, relevant user. And then once you do that, measure it, and then you can even use this as the key KPI in these uncertain times to report back onto your superiors of success in terms of digital marketing efforts. And if you put a value against it, you can actually translate that back into an assumed ROI or future predicted ROI or anything along those lines. So I would definitely recommend in these times to make sure that you spend time looking at tracking. Google Analytics, has lots of functionality in terms of being able to measure engagements and come up with unique combinations that correlate with an advanced relevant user. So here's an example using Google's merchandise store, the Google Analytics 360 account that everybody can get access to. So here's a normal acquisition report, and in GA360, I've actually, just as an example, defined an engaged user. So an engaged user would be somebody who views a product detail page 4 times or more. So you can create one of these segments very easily. You just click Add Segment. I can show you the definition of this particular segment. In terms of, you just create a condition, and then for the session that has 4 product details. So product detail view, sorry, is a product page view in essence. And then when you can define that, you can apply it to any of these predefined reports within Google Analytics, and it'll show you, you know, how those people perform. So yeah, you can measure, you know, all of your information, all of your engaged sessions in any Google Analytics report based on that session. However, this is a bit of a workaround. I would definitely recommend that you create a more robust Google Analytics predefined goal. However, that won't look back at previous data, and a segment would. So for the next one, potentially create soft conversions if there are none. So things that might resonate with your customers. Think about what they're going through, what it is that they would really love to know or would be really useful for them at this point in time as far as content's concerned, and create, you know, a walled conversion that you can potentially then remarket to them at a later point using either email or remarketing if they're opted in. So yeah, I suppose an example of this may be, so if you're a fashion retailer, and you know, the sales might be down because there's not a lot of people going out or anything, but there could be options for creating content around video conferencing chic, or you know, things of that nature that might be relevant to your usership right now that could be useful. So create this soft conversion and then potentially market to them at a later point again. As I've mentioned previously, awareness activity is critical right now. You know, there's an awful lot of browsing and video, YouTube activity occurring, and these are key opportunities to define and reach your given audience in preparation for a time when they're ready to you know, to buy again, and potentially shows that the demand returns. So that these would be excellent vehicles to reach an awful lot of people while things are sort of on a down as far as conversion rates are concerned. I've talked a lot about engagements and you know, creating a goal and tracking these engagements. But I'm just going to quickly take you through a dashboard that that will help you do this. So again, this is available as a link to download. You can connect your own data source. So this is a GA data source that you would connect directly to this Data Studio dashboard. On the left-hand side here, this is all session data. So you can see that your performance week on week to understand what's going on that front. But then critically, you can see the engaged session. So this is using the exact Google Analytics segment that I created previously in the Google Analytics interface. So you can see that, you know, we have there the engaged sessions and how that's performing over each day or week, or however you define that. And you can even segment these engaged sessions and see which channels are potentially driving more than others, and other engagement metrics as far as you know, the session duration and which pages are driving those engagements too. And these are all segmentable as well. If you click on any of these, they should segment. Just a word about how to do this. Once you've created your unique segment, you can then apply that within Data Studio. You should be able to see there's a Google Analytics segment, and that is the exact segment I created previously in Google Analytics. As I said before, this is you know, it's not as robust as creating a goal and then reporting from that goal, but you know, as far as a workaround for now, this can be done. You can also attach an engagement value to your engagement. So you can calculate an arbitrary value and then, you know, times the number of engaged sessions by that value in that particular box, and then it should calculate the value. Okay, I'll jump back to the presentation. So then, just to summarize the workshop, I suppose critically you've got to remember, you know, that measurement is key. Understand what your users are doing, what's driving valuable engaged users right now, create goals and measure them. Monitor your key metrics, like I said, the engagements, search impressions are key to understanding when demand is starting to return. And then be very considered in as far as what's working, what isn't, tailored content and exact audiences, and a message that empathizes with your current, with what your customer base is going through at this given point in time. So finally, a lot of this this content that we talked about today is covered in our white paper. There's a bit more in-depth analysis in there as well around specific channels and things that you should consider. That can be downloaded from our website and will be emailed out to all attendees. So I'll move on to some questions from any attendees. So I've got a question. Can you integrate multiple GA accounts through Data Studio? You can. In short, there's actually a feature within Data Studio that allows you to switch. Switch for the accounts that you have access to. It just requires that the login that you're logged into Google Data Studio with has access to those accounts. So there is an account switcher facility available in Data Studio. Let me just see if I can find it. There's a data control, so it would be this feature that you need. So another question, how did you come up with the engagement value in Google Analytics? I suppose it wasn't that scientific for the purposes of this example. There's there's a per session value. So I added the segment that I created and then used the per session value that's predefined in Google Analytics. But I suppose the principle of, you know, what we would like or what would be useful for yourselves is to understand that that's available, and that's a good way to measure. So you know, I would encourage you to use your own methodology and logic to calculate what's relevant, what's an appropriate value to put against a session. Got quite a few here. So another question. We know app users are more engaged than our website users. How do you attract more of these? So yeah, I mean, there's lots of ways to market your app, using paid and various other tactics as the conversion from, say, Google Ads, and there's paid activity that you can undertake within the app stores themselves. I would say though, it's important to consider, I suppose, in these times at the moment, where there potentially is some time to focus on the measurement side, that Google Analytics does have app and web tracking. So this is a new type of property that Google Analytics launched last year. So I would encourage you to potentially use this time to install and implement app and web concurrently with your current Google Analytics implementation. There's going to be extra features coming on board. It's a beta technology at the moment, but there's going to be all sorts of features coming soon. And I believe that is a unified way of measuring the user across both your app and your website as one. So I have another question. Do you think behaviours will change for good? Will purchase journeys and buying be more online led in the future? I think we've seen probably in certain sectors a massive spike in demand. You would imagine as that demand subsides, there's a new level that is a higher benchmark than it was prior to the lockdown in some areas. People will have got used to buying online if they weren't as confident with that in the past. So yeah, I do think that there will be much more opportunities and demand, I suppose, for buying things online. I suppose as far as retailers and service providers are concerned, they probably want to look at supply chain, and we'll have more focus on those areas, given that I've seen a lot of places not being able to keep up with the demand. So I think that there'll be a lot more focus on there, and therefore if we can get over those issues, then there'll be even more confidence and buying online. And I've got time for one final question. When doing an awareness campaign, how important is creativity? I don't know whether that's creatives or creativity, but creatives are extremely important. Creatives are, I think there's an official Google stat in as far as creatives are concerned that it's 70% of the performance is down to the creative, and 30% is down more to the buy. So it's extremely important to get the creatives right and the messages, and being creative with the creatives, I suppose, is key. So yeah, it is very important. So I think that's it for today. I hope you found it useful, and please do get in touch with us if you would like to understand anything else that you've heard about in the workshop today. So thank you, stay safe, and have a good evening.